Hi, happy Thursday. Welcome back to the Stina Show. I hope you're doing well. Tonight's guest is photographer from SDF Media, Sam Derosa-Farag. Very talented guy. And let's see if we could get him in here.
But how you doing, Sam? You're in LA right now?
It's at Dana Point, which is a little bit south of LA, so it's south of Laguna Beach.
Nice. Excuse me. So,
Well, it's actually totally rainy and the worst weather you can ever imagine, but that's
well, I hope it looks good for you while your last few. When are you coming back to the East Coast?
Saturday.
Enjoy every moment, Sam.
I'm looking forward
So
to it. Thank you.
you and I met. Let's just jump in at a modeling website, which I recommend to everybody, Model Mayhem. I mean, it's like any other website. You kind of have to fish through people, but I've met some great photographers, and you are one of them. And we make a lot of good art together. And
That's very kind. Yes. Please.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, I interrupted you. No.
No.
I'm listening.
I'm just saying you have a lot of
Yeah, it was actually very productive. Well, yes, I guess everything you do is a reflection of how you think, and it's just how I think. That's all.
That's awesome. When you were young, baby Sam, did you know you wanted to be a photographer and in the arts field?
Well, I never thought I was going to be because the daydream is that there are these very famous photographers who live in New York at the time that you're a good photographer in New York. This is like in the 70s and 80s. And so when I first moved to New York, of course, I was working and had nothing to do with photography. And I never met photographers. I mean, like, they didn't seem to walk down the street or something. I don't know. Didn't bump into them. But it all kind of changed when my son was born, and I started taking pictures, and then I decided, okay, I really need to learn how to do that. And then I went to a school called International Center of Photography, ICP. And this is when I met a lot of photographers. The professors were photographers, they were filmmakers, and that was the first time I actually interacted with other photographers.
I love that. So when you were younger, you didn't take photos or anything, or nothing like that?
I did. Well, I'll tell you an embarrassing fact. I thought I was really an awesome photographer. And then two very good friends of mine were getting married. And they said, oh, Sam, take pictures of us. And this is in the old days, in the 70s. So I had a camera called Rolleiflex, which is this German camera. It's like a brick. It's literally like a brick. And you wind the film. It's a 120 film. And for the life of me, I put on the film, but did not crank in. I kept taking pictures. The wedding ended. Not a single picture came out. That was the end of my thinking. And by the way, up till now, years later, they still. Oh yeah, are the pictures coming? So this is when you realize this is not a matter of just taking pictures. There has to be redundancy, reliability. You have to kind of double check. Like, this is not just like when you're a hobbyist, you kind of do things very casually. When there is somebody who's really relying on this, you kind of have to be very careful. You have to have backups. It just, this is when it dawned on me, this is, you need to be serious about this.
I love that. That's fun. That's funny. They still play games with you. Did you have any? It was embarrassing, probably. Do you have any
Oh
current or
God.
past inspirations?
In what sense? People get inspired by everything around them. I'm not sure I'm a good source of inspiration. Other people, like I find that I find amazing artists, and they don't have to be photographers. Whether so, I actually yesterday spent a whole day in a museum called Broad, which incidentally, it turns out that I knew the guy that started the museum. And it's all modern art. And one of the amazing thing about all the art that is in the museum is that it is, if you don't know anything about art and you just look at it, you might totally dismiss it and think it is frivolous. And then you start thinking about it and you read the captions, and you see what happened because of that, and you start realizing this is a pretty serious endeavor. So there is a famous thing in which an artist kind of, in the 1970s, there was a lot of attempts to rescind Roe versus Wade. And there was a lot of protests, etc. So this artist made a big poster that he designed, and there is the picture of a woman, and she's half positive and half negative. So half of it was film day, so people understood negative. Half of her face was negative, and the caption said, "Your body is a battleground." And I thought this was this is a piece of art that was incepted for a very specific event. But from that point on, it has become iconic. Now, I call that really a provocative. It gets you to think. Now, you don't have to agree with him or agree with the cause, but you still think. And I think that's what good art should do.
I love that. I almost feel like that's your deep quote.
No, but it was very inspirational. Very inspirational.
It's so I love that. It's making me think, which is distracting me. So let me come back. But
yeah. When I was young and in my first job, at one point my boss called me in and he said, "Sam, I really need to give you some advice." I said, "Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What can I do?" He says, "You need to understand, we don't think. Thinking is not going to get you ahead in your career." And I thought he was joking. So I started laughing. He said, "What are you laughing at?" And I'm thinking, "You're serious?" And yeah, I'm thinking, my apology. But what do you mean? Like, how can thinking deter your ability to get anything done? So we're just doers. We're not thinkers here. And I thought this was very much a symbol of the environment and the whole obsession with productivity and efficiency, rather than are we getting somewhere or are we doing something? So people want to have the right to speak, but they don't think about what they're saying. We are so obsessed with production, but not focused on. So what does that do? What is the result? What are we? What's the objective? Right.
Instinct. We're instinctual beings.
Yeah, and by the way, this is a very U.S.-centric culture.
Yes. I think, and also there's a difference between instinct and animalistic. You know, I think that there could be a difference there.
So anyway, by the way, that boss of mine was one of the nicest people. He was not mean at all. He was giving me a genuine piece of advice.
That's great. That's a gold nugget right there.
Yeah. Thank God I never listened to him.
No. So, where are you from, Sam? We have your accent and your culture. Where are you from, and where are you now? You're in New York now. You live in New York now, but
I live in New York. Yes. So I was born in Egypt. I come from a Christian minority. So what does that matter? It's just because all minorities tend to have a certain character to them. You are not in the mainstream. You feel that you have to work 2-3 times just to be even accepted. You never expect to be accepted, by the way. Minorities are never accepted.
No.
You always feel you're an observer, but not part of society, which is kind of a very interesting thing. So it's, I find it very odd when people say, do you feel you belong? And I'm thinking, I don't know anybody who actually feels they belong. Everybody has an issue and they don't feel they belong. And I personally feel I'm always have this thing about minorities. So I came from Egypt, kind of where I grew up. The first time I spoke in a single language was when I came to the US. So in Egypt and a lot of parts of the Mediterranean, which is what I call countries that were parts of empires. So one country marched in and occupied it, and another country marched in and occupied it. So if the British come in, so you learn English, and then the French come in, so you learn French, and then the Turks come in and you learn Turkish, and then you like the Arabs come in and you learn Arabic. So you end up with 5-6 languages. So if you speak anything less than 4 to 5, there's a problem with you and we need to talk. which is, by the way, in the US is totally not necessary. The US has a culture of what I call an island culture. An island culture is a very insulated culture. So people literally believe if they speak English, this is all what they need. And most probably they're right. But in other parts of the world, if you do not speak languages, you cannot communicate and get anything done. And it's amazing how context sensitive that is.
But, in other countries, right. It's normal.
I remember when I first met my wife, when I first came here, I went to school, in grad school, and this is when I met my wife, and I was asking her, so what languages do you speak? And she looked at me, she said, English. I said, what other languages do you speak? She said, I'm American, English. And I'm thinking, how do you get along with life like that? And she was like, what do you mean? You can manage, you can live like this? So she was surprised and I was surprised, just to give you an idea about the differences in culture.
We're simple folks here.
No, she's the most wonderful person I've ever met in my life. So that was a big win for me.
Wow, so Egypt. So when did you come to the US?
In 1983. I ultimately came to study computers, and then this is when I met my wife. I was under the impression I'm going to go back or going to live somewhere. But when I say we jointly decided to stay in New York, I think my wife explained to me that her sisters are in New York, and New York is where we'll be. I was young, I didn't understand that means that's the lay of the land, but over time I figured it out. It took me a while, but I really caught on.
So what did you do first? I know you're in finance and engineering. Which route did you choose first?
I'm a nuclear physicist. That's my degree, and then I got into finance. And then since my kids were born, I started getting into photography in a serious fashion.
So for photography, you don't really need, well, you said you went to a school for photography, which probably helps a lot rather than learning on your own.
You can do everything on your own. It's just you have to be disciplined. And school just, somebody has to crack the whip. Get this done. Figure this out. This is what you need to know. And if you're alone, nobody tells you that.
No, it's very difficult. Yeah, no. I'd rather pay for help, all of it.
Yeah, and there were the most interesting thing about school is that, especially when you start taking classes in lighting, you start realizing that you can't do anything on your own. So you have to work with a team. In other words, you have to talk to other people and figure it out. I remember the first time I was, they brought in a model, and we were, we all had like these long lenses and we were standing all the way far. And the teacher came and said, by the way, you can go and talk to her. I said, and say what? He said, like, well, don't you want to know what she wants? Don't you want to give her any direction? I said, really? so we kind of, you get out of this environment in which you think I have to do everything on my own, and I don't need to interact with other people, whether it's colleagues or even who you're photographing. And then you start discovering that actually what you get is a function of the interaction and a function of the people around you. Oh, somebody says, oh, why don't we do that? And in the beginning, of course, you think, oh, what an idiot. And then you say, oh, my God, that's actually quite smart. And over time, you discover, I really need to work with a team. And you figure it out.
Yeah, working alone isn't satisfying, right?
And I think that a lot of the things like all my projects came because I would be talking to somebody and say, what would you like to do in terms of the project we want to do? And all of a sudden, somebody would say, this is really what I want to do. Like the project about identity. I was working with this delightful young lady. And, oh, so what do you want to do? And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the conversation, says, I'm from Bangladesh. And my biggest concern is that I have this enormous dichotomy in my personality. I have this, and I need to be able to explore that. And that actually led to my whole project about identity and personality. It was meeting her, and she said that, and I discovered, like, I would talk to people who were born in Florida and came to New York and say, I'm totally alienated in New York. I don't feel at home. And I'm thinking, really? from Florida? The sunshine, the lack of sunshine really impacted you? But I think we all feel that we have a sense of alienation, and we struggle with our identity. So in the beginning, I thought, oh, I need to work with immigrants. And actually, I discovered that you just need to work with anybody. Some people are totally struggling. Just everybody's struggling with their identity. But that's what started that project. It's a conversation that started. So what do you want to do? She said, I want to wear my sari, and I want to wear a suit. Really? That will do it for you? But when we ended up doing that, it was amazing. And it triggered a whole bunch of, so working with other people, and I think that's the whole idea behind art. It is developing a method and a language to communicate.
Yeah, and it makes me think of physics a little bit, because energy should meet, right? And I think that's kind of what you're doing when you meet. Like when we meet, it's a synergy, and it's a flow. And without that, you're not directing the energy towards anything, empty space, right? And yeah, no, it's very powerful. I love hanging out with you. We have a lot of fun, and it's improv. We don't plan it. We understand the basics, but we don't plan, too much into it. We just know 1, 2, 3, simple basics. Not like, you and I have deep talks when we're hanging out, but
I just thought I'd put you to sleep, and that's a surefire way of doing it.
You're like, here's my notepad. Let's talk about Egypt. No, I love it. We have a lot of fun.
Wonderful. Yes, please.
So I'm sure that you can find connections between your finance gig and engineering to photography. I mean, they're all some sort of art, I guess, an expression in a way. But have you ever brought the few together, or no? They're just separate parts of you and your identity and what you do.
Well, it's actually everything you do in life has the same thing. So, for example, when you first starting doing anything, you're under the impression that you have this imposter syndrome. You think, I don't know anything. This is disastrous. Nobody should ever hire me, or whatever.
No.
And then 5,
who
7,
am
10
I?
years
Who
later,
the F am I, right?
Yeah, and then you realize that ultimately, and then some people go overboard and think that I'm the master of the universe. And by the way, both of them are are equally invalid. Like, I don't think Master of the Universes exist. And being the imposter syndrome, you can suffer from that even if you've been doing your profession for either 10 weeks or 30 years. It really depends how humble and if how much you really realize the amount of things you don't know. But the trick here is just to keep things in perspective. And that's very tricky. In life, we are always, we love to benchmark. So by benchmark, we actually look at others and we see somebody, I don't know, has a cookie. I want to eat the cookie. He's driving a good car. I want one of those cars. And you don't think, what do I want? Like what you're doing is people say, if you really want to be successful, you need to own that car. If you really want to be successful, you need to own a home. And you realize, actually, I should never own a home. I should just rent and have a peaceful life. But that's a separate conversation. So we never think about what we want. And we are obsessed by, and I think this is one of the interesting things that happened with COVID. People kind of got trapped at home, stopped doing, started thinking, and a lot of people I interacted with kind of reconsidered and reshuffled their life because they listened to themselves for the first time. I mean, I know a lot of people who actually left the city. I know a lot of people who actually changed careers. I mean, it was the first time people were thinking about, what do I really want? And I thought that was fascinating.
A period of reflection and forced reflection, but reflection. Yeah.
But the interesting thing, it was also, we were both more thoughtful and empathetic. Like
we did end up connecting with our neighbors more and everything. That's true.
And all of a sudden, we actually started creating empathy about what do we really, and I think that the whole racial problems that occurred in the country, I mean, first of all, this is a historical legacy for the country, so we're not going to touch on that. But the real issue here is it was happening all the time, but the real reason I think people got upset and angry is they actually thought about it. They thought, that's not right. Apart from the fact people felt vulnerable. You know, I'm not as powerful, I'm not Superman or Superwoman. And all of a sudden, this thing became, like, we decided the society, we need to make a change.
Yeah, that was a big time of now that I think about it, it's the most afraid I think I've been in my whole life. It was like the unknown is so scary, you know?
It was, I mean, it would never have been a choice. Like, oh, let's have a pandemic.
Oh yeah, what time? I'll meet you there.
I think around 4ish would be the good time. But anyway, it was very painful. But as soon as we went through it, and like after the initial shock, etc., we actually started thinking. We actually started, and I think people decided, well, what should be my pace? I should be thoughtful about everything I do, because we discovered how obsessive we are about efficiency and productivity rather than thoughtfulness. And I think that was a very interesting start.
You did a project during COVID, right? You said?
Yeah, I called it the Global Enui. So here is the origin of the project. I would be talking to people, and all of a sudden, like, no matter who you're talking to where in the world, and they all feel very similar. Feeling of isolation, feeling like people who would actually even be totally introverts and just don't give a shit about talking to other people, just they try to avoid humanity. Start thinking, I really miss human contact. You know, I need to talk to people. And all of a sudden we realized we want to be empathetic, and we all had a common experience of how we feel. And I thought this would be an amazing time to record how people felt about this. And of course, I couldn't meet people, so I did by phone. I would calls, like I do a FaceTime, like we email and we do all sorts of stuff, and then we do a FaceTime, and I kind of take pictures while I'm doing FaceTime, and then the person on the other side, we talk about their life and what does this pandemic mean to them, and it was fascinating.
Where can you see that online?
It's actually all on my Instagram account, because everything I published on there. So the pictures we took together, and all the text is written by whoever I was talking to. So I didn't write I usually write the text, but that time I actually thought the voice should be other people's voices. And it was fascinating. There was this delightful young lady in New Zealand, and she was saying, "Oh, life is fantastic." I'm thinking, what is the fantastic part? Like, she was in this gorgeous part of New Zealand, in the middle of nowhere. I mean, she would send me pictures, and I'm thinking, well, that, of course, who wouldn't want to live there? But what do you do there? Now, during pandemic, that was pretty good. But and she kind of literally didn't feel anything. I mean, she read about it, but didn't feel it. And then, of course, I had another person who is a person in Italy that we actually worked together. And she lived in Italy, and her mother was a little old, and she was paranoid about if she got sick, something will happen to her mother. So she was like, she doesn't want to meet people. She actually told her boyfriend, don't come to that part, because he had to go to work and stuff like that. He worked in a hospital. Don't even come. And in Italy at the time, they actually, you couldn't leave your apartment without the police checking your ID and say, where are you going? And you can only go to the supermarket and come back. Like, it was pretty serious. And on the other hand, I was talking to this lady in Germany, she's an actress, and she was in Berlin. She said, no, I go to work and I go with my friends for beer. And I'm thinking, this is so bizarre. And of course, at the time we were in New York, and we were like, really like, oh my God, this is the end of the world. And we were the epicenter of the problem.
As always.
Yeah.
That's cool. So you're going to put this into a book, I think you said to me?
Yes. So I think everybody, I did either, depending on what people wanted to do, from 2 to 4 pictures, and then a text from the people. And I think I didn't finish with all 54, but I think I published something like 35, 40 of them.
Wow, that's cool. That's awesome. I can't wait to see it. Is there any way we could buy these things? Or?
Assuming I make it into a book, sure. But it's one of those projects. You have an idea and you think, oh, this is going to be cool, and then I was expecting there was going to be, okay, this is the end of COVID, and that would be the end of the project. Like, I constantly I'm thinking, like, when is the end of the project going to happen? Like, is there? And I thought maybe there is something else I can do. Like, it's actually very tricky when you work on a long-term project, because that took around 9 months to work on. When do you decide, okay, this is it?
Yeah. Maybe you'll do an Omnicron as the part 2.
Yes. I mean, I remember the first time I actually published my book, the first book I did, was because I was going to exhibit one of the first exhibits, and I was in this group, and there was a deadline. So I just sent it to the printer. That's why I finished it. There was a deadline. I need deadlines. Otherwise, it just becomes perpetual.
All right, you got 1 week. Well, so you have another book.
Well, the first book was called kind of Windows and Doors. And then my second book was called Buildings That Lost Their Voice. And Buildings That Lost Their Voice was a project. It took me around 5 years. I traveled a little bit, and I would take pictures of buildings that are quite iconic. And most of them are pretty historical, very impressive. Yeah, you look at the building, nice. Big stuff. But the problem is, culturally, we're somewhere between 50 to 2, 3, 5, 700 years apart from when that was built. So the symbolism and the all what the building implies is kind of lost on the average person going into the building. Like, we recognize it's nice and we know it's humbling, like it's big, it's high, it's, you know, there's gold, there's stuff. But the message is, so I called it buildings that lost their voice.
I love that because if you think about it, any of the buildings we go on, we don't really think much about it unless you know it's haunted or whatever. No one, right? Unless it's a historic landmark or it's something special, no one thinks about the ins and outs of where they're entering at all times. That's a good point.
But even if it's a historical landmark, we don't remember what was the convention, what is the meaning of these things, like because when you are doing it at the time, like everybody would like, there are symbols that we all know, and then 50, 100 years later, what on earth is that? I thought that was a flower. Yeah, it is a flower, but it means that. I said, when was that? And, you know, and it's like me talking to my kids and they say these this kind of terms, and I say, what on earth are you talking about? And there are all these new terms that all the young ones come up with. And if it wasn't for my kids, I would be a dinosaur and obsolete.
Good guides, youthful guides. So can you buy your books online or?
Well, they were self-published on it's called I will remember the name in a second. It's a self-publishing platform. And you kind of so it's not really in a classical publish where you actually do a run. You just order it and they print it for you. And you can also get it digitally, which is kind of a lot of the self-publishing thing is right now.
So if people want the book, they could direct message you.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know why people would want that, but God bless.
Why not? I loved it. I know there's a beautiful blue building in there. I remember seeing when I looked in it. It has great photos in there. So why not? But so you, what about? I want to talk about. Do you have any pro photo tips for beginners just getting into the game, or career advice maybe? Because now you're pretty busy doing it, right? So.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue there is we go through these phases. So the first phase, you kind of look at something and you like it, and you try to imitate it. So you're not really thinking of what I want to do or what I want to say. You're kind of very obsessed of how I get it done. So that, and that's very productive. You know, go through it. Look at photographers you admire and imitate them. By the way, this is how we all, when we were kids, we imitated our parents, and this is how we speak and do anything. So that's not a bad thing. This is how we learn. But just make sure you get to phase 2. When you actually know how to do it, and then you have to think, what do I want to say? Because if you don't do that, you're just imitating everybody else. And there is an obsession about fads and, oh yeah, you need to use filters, or you need to use gels, or you need to do this, or you need to do that, because that's like the fad. But people don't ask the question, that what are you trying to do? What are you trying to say? Is there a message? And people forget, pictures can be whatever you want it to be. So there is what we call the snapshot, which is, my kid's birthday, click, second birthday, everybody happy, cake, hats, okay, birthday. When your kids grow up and say, did you take any pictures? Oh, yeah, here it is. You see, you were happy there was a cake. What's the problem?
Right.
You had a good childhood here. So anyway, so that's the click thing. But over time, ultimately, like anything, do we speak, do we write, do we do anything? Yes. But at some point you say, What do I want to say? And images are exactly the same. And if you get to that, then you have to start thinking, okay, what is it that I want to say? And by the way, we as a society are obsessed by repeating what we hear. We're so inundated by news. People say, there is, I don't know, a rich guy, the head of Amazon, and he's going to space, and people get divided. What a loony bin! What on earth is he doing in space? Now that people say, I wish I can go to space. And understand is, so if you had money, what would you want to do? It has nothing to do with, this is his dream. What is your dream? What do you want to do? And we are so kind of repeat whatever we consume rather than shut this all off and say, okay, what is important for me? And it's kind of not complex. We as human beings have very basic needs. We want good food, or at least food. If it's good, that would be great. We kind of, we need some camaraderie. Which is why we get married and have kids and we have friends. And by the way, it's up to you whether you want to have like yucky food or like delightful food. And ditto for other things. Do you want to just say hi to people, or to really have a meaningful relationship with them? And art is not any different. Do you want to take a snapshot, or you want it to mean something? And maybe it actually becomes either an inspiration or it triggers a discourse. Then it becomes very interesting. And by the way, over time, we all start thinking about mortality and what is my legacy and what have I done in Earth? And at some point, you will have to ask yourself, what have I done? Have I just lived for myself? Or have I done something that is worthwhile? What have I done? Like if I go away with any, I'm sure nobody will care, but that's apart my, there's even a question. But, somebody, but have I had any positive impact on humanity? I'm not sure I would change the world or history, but have I actually had an attempt to do that? And I think that's an important thing to start thinking about.
Yeah, and there's degrees and levels of people and where they stand with that question, right? It's like, if you want to save the world, you become an environmentalist or something like that. And it's like, you have to have satisfaction in your plight too, right? For me, if I think about it, I could think of positive things I've done, but am I satisfied with what I've done? If I left the world today, right, you're saying, I think we have to accept what we've done at this point if we're trying our best,
And there is also that I admire people who want to save the world. I have decided that my ability to save the world is not that robust. So I look at my immediate, have I been good to my kids? Have I been a good companion to my wife? Which, by the way, is easier said than done. We all have our challenges. Hopefully we have also our good side. And you're trying to make one bigger and one smaller and make it manageable. And then, like, the maximum that I think we can be doing is, what is my impact on the people that I touch? And that's the important part. Because so I find that people who want to change the world is wonderful. I just, maybe I'm not that ambitious. I think that the probability of me personally saving the world is not that high. I'll just will concentrate on the people around me.
I think part of like getting satisfaction out of living, that's one of my recent things is just accepting your power in a good way, know what your worth is, accepting it, and that gives you satisfaction. Otherwise, you're reaching for the stars at this unattainable image of yourself, when you just have to, right, as you're saying, look around you and hone in on what you can do, right?
And life is like any project. it kind of never finishes until you're done.
Yeah.
And at any point, you kind of think, okay, there are some things I did, some things I didn't do. Keep working on it. That's all.
Yeah, just keep going, right? Keep
Yeah.
trying.
But just
Never give
make
up.
sure, but make sure that you actually have had a positive impact. Have I helped people? Like, kind of, there are people who would say, have you done your good deed for the day? Maybe that's not such a bad idea. Just make sure every day you have a good deed.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just being that good person going out into the world, because you don't want to think about what the balance of the checklist of good versus bad. You just want to do your best to be positive and good, and then no ultimatums, right? And it's just like, I'm doing my best to stay positive, and then you come up the second wind and you're like, I'm doing it. I'm doing it.
And every once in a while, years later, I remember the first time I took my son. We went on a trip, and we spent 2 or 3 weeks in Japan, and he was constantly playing with his Game Boy or something. And I was like so frustrated. My God, we're going to all this culture and looking at all this stuff, and he's looking at this screen. And I felt this is an absolutely 100% failure. Okay. And then around 3 or 4 years later, we were on another trip, and we were in the midst of a conversation, and somebody was saying that, how come they don't have crosswalks that go X? Why are the crosswalks always on the perimeter? They kind of are like squares. And all of a sudden, my son says, no, in the Ginza in Tokyo, the crosswalks are X. You can go right, left, and across. And I'm thinking, he was awake. He remembers. And it turned out he was totally aware. He just had a different way of observing. Just be patient. And that's really difficult for us. We have zero patience. And then over time, you kind of, and like one of those events happen, and you say, my God, I should just figure out that other people also have it. Like for me, when I eat something good, I say, oh, this is wonderful. And I think I have to. Some people just, and they're quiet. And I feel like, is it good? Like, how is it? Just allow people to absorb and do their things on their own way. And then over time, you'll figure it out. Did that work or did it work?
Yeah, we all have different expressions. It's hard to accept we're not all part of the assembly line, right? Do you have a deep quote or enlightenment experience to share with us today?
I'm not sure I do. I think that the majority of what I think of enlightenment is. So I'll tell you exactly how I kind of working with other people, especially whether at work or in photography, worked. When I first started, I thought we were told the photographer is in charge. So he's the captain. You're in charge of safety. You're in charge of light. You're in charge of everybody where they should do. You're in charge of delivering the final product. You're in charge. Okay. And this is something a lot of people are very comfortable with. I'm the man, which is wonderful. And so you have this bizarre idea that you just tell people what to do. And one of the problems is in production, that's very productive, but in an artistic fashion, you constantly are producing exactly the same thing because you're listening to your voice, which, if that's what you want, God bless. Then comes the art of like listening to other people, and this is when you start realizing there is a whole other world out there. Like I was working with this delightful. She was really young, and she's a dancer. She's a ballet dancer. Delightful. And she said, "Yeah, this is when I knew that I was going to live." And I'm thinking, "I'm sorry. What do you mean live? I mean, you're alive." She said, "Oh yeah, no, I had cancer, and ballet is really what saved me. Really, when did you have cancer? Oh, when I was 12.
Yeah.
Okay, so this young lady, so from the outside, she looks really young and she's very delightful, etc. So you think, happy person. But her experience was like she is obsessed with trying to help patients of cancer. I mean, there is an enormous depth to her that was delightful. I know it was not from a good place, but we all have our experiences, and for her, that was a life-changing situation. And when I met her mother, she kept saying, "Yeah, she can do anything. Just you can push her because for her, my kid has overcome this and is capable of doing anything." And I was just amazed. Like, here's a person that I thought, okay, this is going to be an exercise of getting these beautiful images. And all of a sudden, I can't start saying, well, what can we do to help that cause? And we're starting to think about working with the hospital and actually doing a project for them. And like, all of a sudden, I thought, this is why you have to start listening. And this is when different aspects of the world opens up to you. This has been a transformation for me. Just listening.
Oh, and for you, I mean, whenever you invite someone into your space, you almost prepare the space for that listening. It's very simplistic and minimalistic, and you don't like when I put my music too fast.
I don't hear that well, so I can't understand when there is music and you're talking to me. So I just have an impaired hearing, that's all.
Classical works, I know that. I've tried.
Yes. Which, by the way, when I'm driving with my wife, we actually occasionally end up having no music because there are some difference in perspectives of which music should be on.
So nothing. That's funny. That's a real relationship. So you're basically saying that your enlightenment experience is all the time because you're learning as you go with the enlightenment of listening, it sounds like.
And everybody has just a totally different experience and a totally different just perspective. It is really amazing.
Yes,
Like,
it's funny how all this goes back to identity.
yes.
That's like the through line,
Like every time I meet somebody and we work on something, I feel as if I'm opening the door or the window on a different world. And this is their perspective. This is how they see things. And all of a sudden realize, wow, that's very interesting. And, just like my wife and myself, we actually went to Miami at one point just for vacation. And we went down at the bottom of the building where we had the Airbnb. There was a coffee place, and the coffee was wonderful. And we're chit-chatting, and the guy is from somewhere in Latin America. So we discovered he actually he owns a lot of kind of bean production, a kind of coffee bean. And in the Dominican Republic, they have these amazing bean production. And one of his projects is to kind of help the farmers get these genus of coffee beans. And he's trying to market them in the US to help all, he had a whole agenda. So we started by just having a cup of coffee. And it's just like, I said, where do they learn about that? He says YouTube is the biggest source of how these farmers learn of how to do things.
Wow. That's the discipline. That's the self-taught right there.
It's amazing. And he thinks that the problem becomes not how to do it, but to market. And he thought that's the thing that he would. So when you talk to people, you kind of realize amazing stuff.
Yeah,
By the way,
great things. You're So how do you stay motivated as a human, as a photographer, as an artist, as a math man? Because those are two separate parts of the brain. How do you stay motivated?
You kind of have to always kind of think, okay, I watch a lot of interviews and history, and I look at what artists achieved, and I always am looking at, in general, artists try to address a problem, either personal or communicate an issue that they think is important to them. And I look at what people do and I'm thinking, wow, that would be a wonderful way to actually express that idea. Like there are always these ideas. Like I was at this museum, the Broad Museum in LA, and there was this African American artist. So in the beginning, I had no idea she was an African American artist. It was this magnificent mural, just the size of a wall. And it was all silhouette. So it's all white and just the person is in black. It's a silhouette. And I thought, how elegant. And then I realized that actually all the people are black because she is black. And I never thought of it. I thought, oh, how elegant, silhouette. And then she kind of, and there is like, and the more you read about it, and there are like these dimensions and depth to it. And I thought, this is brilliant. And I kind of, I'm working right now with and that's why it's interesting to meet artists and tell them, what are you thinking? So let's try to do this. So, well, here is what I'm trying to do. So I just finished a project with a wonderful choreographer slash dancer. It's called Chroma, and we just posted it. And I was talking to her, so what should we do next? She said, well, I want to actually work with a number of people. So there would be a number of dancers and the interaction between them, etc. She says, what do you think of the setting? And we started thinking about, we should actually have everything lit from the top, and it would be like a cloud. And then what do we have the color scheme of everybody? And we kept working on it. And is everything is what I thought, is what she thought. Like, she's a brilliant person. Maybe I had one or two okay ideas. But in the end of the day, there is some really exciting stuff that happens. So when you talk to people and they are, you kind of get all sorts of ideas and realize that would be amazing if we got this. So,
Yeah, I have. Go ahead.
Please.
Oh, I just want to show a quick clip of the video. I have it up here. Hold on. Let me see. Where did she choose this music from?
We actually, because most of the music is copyrighted, so we had to buy the track. We actually spent a lot of time looking for a track that we actually can work with all this. Believe it or not, this is one of the most time-consuming things in the whole project.
Oh, it's the copyright law, right? The Commons, Creative Commons. Wow, I love that. I love
So we actually had.
So
Yeah, the silks were very helpful. And you know, this whole silk thing happened by total accident. My wife wanted to buy buttons, and I went with her, and the store had silks. So
the rest is history.
By the way, my wife did get the buttons.
Did she? Did she actually?
Yeah, she did get the buttons.
She saw you leaving with pounds of silk.
She knew that while she's doing that, she will let me go there and do my stuff. And like she said, yeah, get him out of the house. Let him do stuff.
Let him off the leash.
Yes.
So you stay motivated by getting inspired by other artists.
Yes. And especially when you read a lot about history, and there is a lot of people that talk about complexity, etc. And you start thinking about what are the questions we really should be addressing? And then how do we address it? So when you look at artists, you look at ways to express yourself. And when you look at history and socioeconomics, etc., you kind of look at what are the messages, you want to tackle.
So, you know, one of my issues as an artist, because I also paint and draw, and I'm also, you know, I do film and TV. When I'm about to sit down and maybe write something, a song, or paint something, I have too many ideas, right? And it's like, how do you grab the one you want most? Like, obviously there's a priority. Maybe you're going through it the most, but for me, that's sometimes what it is. Like, once you asked me, and I was overwhelmed with how many ideas come to my head, where I can't, you know, it's like a cloud of random ideas, and it's like you have to grab one. But sometimes it comes through. But other times, I saw Alicia Keys said earlier, you have to work for it. You have to go kind of dig to find it. So what are some examples of how you found your focus?
It happens in parallel, and then they kind of meet. There are ideas that are percolating, and then there are projects that I'm working with. So I have been very fortunate because I only like to work with people who are very kind of motivated, intelligent, and have a lot of ability, whether they're actors, dancers, singers, like whatever it is they do. And if you just listen to these people, and people are just like really, by the way, everybody have their strength and weakness. The idea there is just look for the strength and take advantage of it. So that's one thing. And so I'm constantly producing things, and then I'm looking for context for them. So one of the most recent thing is this whole thing about the question about whether we are brains or we are stomachs. So, and this is it's a classical question. This is not something new. There was this economist called Malthus, who was actually a priest in the UK in the 1700s. And he was convinced that people are stomachs. And he thought that there are too many people. That's why you need to go to war and kill them. Just kill them because there are too many. So for a priest, that was very enlightened, God bless. Anyway, so, and right when he did this, the Industrial Revolution happened, and all of a sudden we went from a limited resource to we actually had the ability to be a finder's economy. We actually could scratch and do mining, and all of a sudden we shifted from a limited resource society to an open resource society. And all of a sudden, the question did not become that we were stomachs. It's a matter of innovation, and we became known as brains, as assets. And this is a very interesting thing, because if you think that people are brains, let's talk about some of the most explosive issues we have in our society today. Immigration. Some people hate foreigners, some people love them. Okay, whatever. But the bottom line is, if you think we are stomachs, more people is problematic. Kill them. Like, too many people, not enough truth. And there is an argument, he's taking my job, whatever. But if you think that we are really an innovating kind of organism, and the more you get smart people, we can innovate, and actually that can propel the economy, and we can live better and live more peacefully, then immigration has it. So just your view of what are the resources and who are the other people in the society that you deal with makes a big difference whether you have tolerance. And these are wonderful people. They are a resource. I want to learn about their culture. This is fantastic because, you know, they will innovate, they will start businesses, they will do all sorts of stuff. Or, they'll just eat, they'll get fat. It's going to be disastrous. Too many Kentucky Fried Chicken. You know, so all of a sudden, so you really have to, and this is a very interesting way of kind of constantly rephrasing why are people, in fact, people get very edgy and threatened because they have an assumption. And that's why, and that's where art comes in. Art is supposed to float an idea and get these people to start think about, you made an assumption that we're all stomachs, maybe we're not. I mean, you will never convince people, oh, you should love your neighbor. It's not going to happen.
That's true. And not all of them. Some of them, maybe. Where does the heart come into play?
That's, I mean, I'm sure it does, but that comes in terms of empathy and compassion. So we kind of, so I think of it the other way around. Should I be self-centered or should I have empathy with the society? And the short answer is we should. There is very few people, I'm sure they do exist, that are pure self-centered. God bless them. Maybe they're very productive. And some people are just absolutely selfless. And the problem is the two extremes are a little bit alienating. The person who's totally self-centered is not very inspiring. And people who are totally selfless don't end up really taking care of themselves. So the idea there is, what is the balance? And I think we, as a society, given how busy we are, we need empathy, and empathy only happens through emotion, and that's where the heart comes in.
I love that. I love that the heart brings balance, because it's the in between. You know, it makes physical sense, and also the heart gives power to everything, right? Without the heart, there's no energy, right? So
if we were not born to procreate, I think we would have killed ourselves. I mean, we kind of figure out, okay, we need to be able to eat. But if we were not born to procreate, we say, okay, I have to be nice to, like, women have to be nice to a guy has to be nice to a woman just to have a baby. Thank God for that. And then once you have a baby, you start thinking, okay, I want more peace. I don't want more like strife. And then you realize, if it wasn't for that, the world would be constantly at war.
It'd be empty, and there would just be wild animals left, huh?
Not enough brains. So there is a big argument for why you should have a lot of compassion. It gets you out of yourself.
Yeah, right. That's true. So we're out of time. If you want to say a last hoorah, or last few words to our audience, they come and go, but this will live on in the matrix. So.
Fantastic. God bless the matrix. Just live life with purpose and be thoughtful and have compassion.
Beautiful. Simple, beautiful. Sorry, I only speak one language.
On a good day. On a good day.
That's true. There's levels to that. Thank you, Sam, for coming. I would love to bring you on again just to hang out if you ever want to join. I love your topics and your knowledge. I love your brain, Sam. Thank you.
Quite a pleasure. Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Say hi to your wife and babies, and I'll see you soon. Let's do something.
You know, they're not exactly babies, you know that.
I know, but they're babies to you. I know that.
Yes.
Thank you, Sam. Take care.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
See you soon. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Wow, is Sam the best? Oh, man. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I appreciated your comments and joining. And take care of yourself, meditate, run, breath work, anything you can do to take care of yourself so you can be kind to others. Compassion, as Sam said. Much love, and I'll see you soon.